Sword Art Online, a title that you could say is popular. I mean, as far as I remember it was the anime everyone watched and talked about before Attack on Titan was released. If the anime is remembered for one thing, it is that it popularized the isekai genre, which led to spawning many more lookalike and inspired series. Quickly, for those who don't know what the isekai genre is, a quick explanation. Its story revolves around a person who is transported to and has to survive in another world. And said world can be anything and is only limited by your imagination. Now, the other thing Sword Art Online is remembered for is that it's bad, like really bad, almost shit. No, actual shit. Oh, well, that's what many people say, but it's honestly not that bad. Don't get me wrong, there are strong arguments to be made for it not being good. But most hate towards Sword Art Online is bandwagon style, and I'm not having that, at least not in my review. I do personally think Sword Art Online isn't particularly good. However, the main reason why I think that is not because of the lack of quality. What to me gives Sword Art Online such a bad name is that its writing wastes an insane amount of potential and possibilities, ruining possibly one of the most interesting settings and stories in the isekai genre. Worst of all is that it keeps on doing it, time and time again. It sets the stage and builds something up only to completely waste it. And that is the reason why I like it. You could compare it to a slow motion car crash, however the element that is used to waste all this potential is also something I like, but I'm getting ahead of myself. For the series that is known for its, let's say weaker qualities, it does have a surprising yet very scary amount of games, which I all bought. Why? Well, curiosity got the better of me. Plus, a small part of me hopes that the games can at least make the story better than the anime did. Also, I think it's a fun challenge to try and play a full game series and see how far I can get. And that's how I got here. It's basically me gambling a small chance of success on a series that I like for odd reasons, and just to see how far I can get into a game series before I burn myself out. And of course, I will be reviewing every game along the way. First up, Sword Art Online Re-Hollow Fragment. Let's begin, shall we? Sword Art Online Re-Hollow Fragment is not the first game in the series. The first one in the series was released only in Japan, and despite my love and large amount of reviewed weeb games,
I don't speak Japanese.
So yeah, I can't play the first one, so it's off to the second one. Luckily, Sword Art Online Re-Hollow Fragment gives a small yet alright recap of the first game's story, helping you to bridge the gap of the first game while at the same time actually giving this game enough strength to stand alone. Though if you watch the first arc of the anime, you also have enough information to bridge this gap. In Sword Art Online, there are 10,000 people stuck in a video game with the rule that if they die in the game, they die in real life. The only way to escape this death game is by beating it. How do you beat it? By climbing your way up all the way to floor 100th and beat the final boss. The first game ended on floor 75, and that is where Re-Hollow Fragment's story continues, and the goal still stays the same: making it to the top and finishing this death game. It's a simple yet very cool premise if you ask me. Games usually are associated with enjoyment and relaxation, not with death and despair where lives of many people are at stake. I do really like it that they went for a more old school game design of beating floors/levels instead of the large messy storm of today's games design. It keeps it simple and easy to understand for people that are less familiar with games. The premise for me also creates a nice feel of discovery. 100 unknown floors to go through means a lot of things to explore and a lot of things to see. But as I have hinted at the start of this video, most of this potential is wasted. Because the premise Sword Art Online sets up is not what Sword Art Online is about. Instead of this dark toned death game, we have harm stuff. Harm stuff everywhere. Yes, a story in a death game where everyone is risking their life is not about that. It's about one guy that is surrounded and loved by a group of women. Together they have a happy, everything is good and great, no worries life inside this death game. Which is also sorta cool if you ask me. I mean, it's sort of a satire or parody on the original premise. Personally, I do not think taking the harm story approach is a bad thing by itself. Like I said, I do enjoy these kind of stories from time to time as well. It's just that normally in those stories there's not an immense waste of another story. And that waste is just as immense here in the game as it was in the anime. However, the story that revolves around the characters in the game is more detailed and a lot better than in the anime. In the game you play as the main guy named Kirito, or well, you play as him in the cutscenes. Outside of them you actually play as your own created character. Now, I am all for creating my own character, however here it does come with a little bit of annoyances at times, as everyone will call your character Kirito, even though you named your character differently or might even be a completely different gender. This overall disrupts the feeling of being your own character, as the character that is on screen is set in stone who he/she is going to be, despite your choices or how he or she looks. Kirito, and therefore your character, is of course the most badass, smartest, big-brained OP chat of a gamer that the world has ever seen. Now, despite him being so amazing, he's mostly clueless when it comes to women expressing their love to him, as are most male characters in a harm story. There is a lot of time spent on interacting with the group of characters, which usually involves very lighthearted to odd and even perverted situations and dialogues. Now, I can really enjoy and laugh about these situations and dialogues, as it's kinda silly but also funny and cute to see unfold. Of course, there are times where a more serious tone is taken. These moments are very cliché and usually come out of nowhere. This is especially the case near the end of the game, as the story is not developed until that point. Most of the time it's just you interacting with the girls and clearing some floors. Now, the things that the story pulls at the end could have been interesting, yet just like with the premise, it got pushed to the side and ruined by fast pacing and the characters trying to figure out more important stuff, like who of the girls has the biggest chest. The story is told through traditional visual novel text, however all of it is voice acted by the original cast from the anime, which is a huge plus. Not only makes it easier for fans of the series to connect with the game, but also for newcomers it's easy to get into, as the voice acting is really well done. The characters themselves are mostly the common stereotypes, yet in the game every character gets a lot more screen time, therefore are better fleshed out than in the anime and feel less like bland stereotypes, which is something I hoped and wanted to see as a fan of the series. Unfortunately, the development of the characters is very inconsistent. I do applaud that the game introduced new characters to the group, yet one is there just for plot reasons and has nothing more going for her, while the other one has a lot of depth and is actually really interesting and quickly became one of my favorite characters. There were even characters that I initially didn't really like going into the game, only to start liking them as I got to know them better, which was a pleasant surprise. What was another pleasant surprise was that the game does give you full control to pick whoever you want to be interacting with, and actually form some kind of relationship with these characters. I mean, you can hold hands with them and of course end up in, let's say have a slumber party with them. Yeah, sometimes this game felt more like a dating sim than anything else. And if you like that, or again are a fan of the series itself, you will feel at home here for sure. Lots of fun characters with even more funny interactions. But if you don't like that or are not a fan of the series, you might have a rough time getting into this atmosphere and overall story. And unfortunately, the combat cannot make up for this rough time. Personally, I have a hard time with the store page describing the combat as RPG or JRPG. The combat mostly reminded me of a very bland MMO starting experience, which, considering this game tries to resemble an MMO, is quite soothing, yet not really fun. The combat happens in real time. Once you engage an enemy, your character automatically attacks with the basic attack. It's then up to you to use skills and positioning yourself the best possible way to deal the most damage. Skills do a lot of damage and come with these really cool animations, but it takes a while to be executed. It also stunlocks the enemy, which is the most important part throughout the whole game. Maybe it was just me, but because the skills are my only actual input into battle, I felt very pushed to use them, which indirectly pushed me to the tactic of only creating endless amount of stunlock chains. In other words, the more I was involved with the battle, the more I was pushed to this direction. But hey, a stunlocked enemy can't deal damage to you, so that made the game a lot easier. Plus, you get a lot of bonus damage to chain skills with your partner, which, just like with the story, is where the combat wants you to focus on. When you go on an adventure, you can take one partner with you, and this is where the game introduces a rather clever idea/system. You get a decent amount of control over your partner. You can order them to retreat, switch, use a healing item, and most importantly, when they use their skills. This is what made creating stunlock chains so easy, and if timed correctly, you can basically make them never ending. But interestingly enough, your partner adapts its playstyle to your instructions. To a certain degree, that is. Which is a cool idea. Its workings might be very flawed, as I only noticed them adapting to my instructions when it comes to using skills, but nonetheless, it's a very cool idea that your partner will adapt to your playstyle and actually create some kind of a hybrid playstyle together. It's a fun little idea which I hope will return, improved of course, later in the series. Yet, it couldn't prevent the bland and boring feeling that the combat has. You just sit around and wait to do your own skill or to command your partner to do theirs. In the meanwhile, you can't focus on other things like the battle overview, as that is very chaotic and was not worth to keep an eye on in the first place. And while at the beginning the combat felt alright, it became very boring after 20 hours of it. Funny enough, there is a 4-player multiplayer option for this game, which I couldn't check out unfortunately, but I have my doubts that it could make the overall gameplay more fun. Personally, I think this game could have been more fun if it stuck to a more direct and standardized formula of a JRPG, or even just a hack and slash. Especially the latter one could fit very well, considering that the game that is created in the anime resembles a hack and slash than anything else. But I wouldn't have minded to see some kind of combat system that the Tales of series has, or something along those lines. Still, the combat is very hollow and kinda wasted, as it's just there, almost like it's an afterthought, which is a shame. However, the wasting doesn't end there, as exploration is also hugely mistreated. In the anime, we skip over most of the 100 floors, which sucks, because the handful of floors we get to see are great. And here in the game, we actually get to explore all 25 floors, which is cool. Finally, we get to make our way up to the top floor and even explore the Ruby Castle at the top. That is what I actually really wanted for a long time, and I finally get to do it. Only to be disappointed by the result. Map design is very bland and straightforward, which probably has to do something with this game's age and original platform. While every floor has some uniqueness to it, it still felt very copy-paste and overall became one big blur of the same thing over time. But what was particularly disappointing was the way you clear all these floors. The first few times it's alright and a lot of fun. You get the gang together in front of the boss room, enter it and get a reveal of the boss, which is followed up with the boss fight itself. Despite its limited and lackluster animations, it was fun and mimicked the MMO feeling very well. Unfortunately, the combat is so bland that it even makes these fights very boring. And after beating a couple of these fights, the fun and the mimic started to wear off, and I honestly started to dread the idea that there were 20 plus more of them. Which sounds really bad, as that is never a feeling you want to experience when playing a game. Luckily, there is one saving grace for this game. I have been focusing on the main premise throughout my whole review, yet there is another side story which is just as limited by the same design as the rest of the game, yet manages to do a lot of things better. This side story is taking place in the Hollow area, a location that in the story exists outside of the normal game. What makes the Hollow area so interesting is that things work slightly different than in the normal game. Not everyone can enter this area, and the whole place is filled with free roaming monsters of a much higher level than in the normal game, and some of them are even floor bosses. Items and gear are also from a level not seen in the normal game, and on top of all that, the other players in the area act strangely. Only seconds after getting into the hollow area, you are introduced to a new character, and together with her you start to explore this unknown area and uncover its mysteries. I really like this part of the game a lot, as it actually manages to create this feeling of exploration that I missed in the normal game. Because there's no floor system, the area instantly feels more open and bigger, even though it's not an open world. It are actually all little small instance maps that are connected to one another, and they overall feel more unique than all floors combined. Some places actually look really cool and impressive, and it really made me feel like I was in another game inside a game, which really helped to sell this whole idea of the hollow area. And on top of that, it had a decent side story which came with a little fun twist, and it was not ruined by the usual harm stuff. Unfortunately, fighting was still just as bland, but as the monsters were higher level, it required a lot more attention than throughout the rest of the game. Yet it is in the hollow area where my desire for a better combat system became bigger, as it would have done more justice to it. But to me, the hollow area is this game's saving grace, as I can use it to balance out the floor grinding with fun exploration of the hollow area, which made this floor clearing part of the game a lot more bearable. Sword Art Online Re-Hollow Fragment is overall a decent but rough game. It does suffer from the same problems that I had with the anime, however it suffered a lot less because of the large amount of time spent interacting with these characters. Unfortunately, these characters are written and put in such an atmosphere that it's very specifically aimed at certain audiences. You will feel right at home here if you are a fan of it in general, or if you're a Sword Art Online fan. But if you're not a fan of this kind of story, characters, or overall atmosphere, then you may experience a rough time, and I highly recommend not getting into the game, as the combat or other elements can't make your experience less rough. Personally, I would prefer this over the anime. For me, the game just does more and better things in terms of character and story. But overall, I wouldn't call Sword Art Online Re-Hollow Fragment a very good game. It's a rough game, but it will be fun for those who like this specific type of story, atmosphere and characters. Or if you are a Sword Art Online fan, of course. One thing I did not expect, but I am more curious to see the other games after completing this one. Luckily, my curiosity decides which game I will be reviewing next, so be sure to subscribe so you will be notified for when I got around reviewing the next Sword Art Online game. Now with that all being said, I wish you a good day and until next time.